One of the biggest conspiracy theories is that the original moon landing was fake. Many speculate that the moon landing was created on a set built by Hollywood, and many different props were used to make viewers believe the stunt was real. Although many people think that the moon landing was faked by Hollywood, there's tons of evidence that shows that the moon landing was real and was impossible to fake. At a time where many individuals didn't have access to television or radio, who missed out on the moon landing, were left uneducated if they really landed on the moon, or if they put a man on the moon. This is
I believe that the moon landing was real and couldn't have been faked just so that the U.S. could show their superiority over the Soviet Union. The main points I'll be talking about is how Buzz Arnold and Neil Armstrong would not have gone out of their way to Hollywood to fake this, and that America still would have won the space race no matter what. So, on my first stance about them going to Buzz Arnold and Neil Armstrong going to Hollywood to fake this, they were both Korean War vets who went to MIT to go get their aeronautics and astronautics degrees to actually go up into space instead of the fake Hollywood world. And based on Neil Armstrong saying that it was a small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, it was not wrong, as they also sent up multiple trips back to the moon after this first time. In an interview later in his life, they asked him what he thought about his footsteps on the moon, and he said that he hopes someday someone will go back up to the moon and get rid of his footsteps. And based on his quote, this space race was okay. So the United States, technically, according to us, won the space race because we were the first ones to actually visit somewhere out in space, hence the moon landing. And as some people think that it's faked, there's no possible way that it could be faked, as there's videos and multiple things of evidence that proves it. The only difference is people think that the United States would fake it because the Soviet Union beat us to sending something to space. And their first thing that they sent in space was Sputnik 1, which was a satellite in the late 50s. And then they also sent up the first man into the Earth's orbit. He stayed in orbit for a whole day, as well. The first man that America sent up there was only up there for 15 minutes and then came crashing back down. And a man from the United States did not go back into orbit until a full year later. Even though there's all this evidence that could make it seem impossible that the moon landing could be faked, there are still some people who think the government faked it and filmed it in Hollywood.
It was filmed in Hollywood. Technology back then wasn't as good as it is today. with all the different programs at our fingertips, it would be effortless to try and fake the moon landing today. Back then, though, they had the ability to record evidence in real time with film cameras, making it difficult but possible to fake such an event. Props, backdrops, costumes, sets, and actors is all needed to pull off such a stunt. The film from the cameras could be spliced in one video reel, giving the illusion that the whole event happened in one take. Hollywood has always been an entertainment medium for the population by using props, costumes, and sets. Hollywood produces movies and TV shows of all kinds, which is why the U.S. wanted Hollywood to create a set that looked like the moon's surface in order to win the Cold War / space race between the USSR. Famous for its lifelike dinosaurs, monsters, lifelike sets, such as jungles and other planets, there's no way Hollywood wasn't able to pull off the moon landing set. The government faked it to win the space race. The U.S. government faked the moon landing in order to win the space race against Russia. The space race was between the United States of America and the USSR, which is now modern-day Russia, during the Cold War. These superpowers wanted to expand and show superiority over one another in their military firepower and technological advances. Despite having trained engineers and impressive goals, the USSR lost the USA's NASA program, who was strictly guided and met certain goals. The U.S. faked the moon landing to show that the U.S. was far more superior than the USSR. By winning the space race, the U.S. would become the superior country and a superpower to all other countries. The U.S. faked the moon landing to show other countries that the U.S. is the most technically advanced country on the planet at the time. This helped the U.S. win the Cold War and eventually take down the Soviet Union, removing gulags and the Berlin Wall.
Next, I will be giving the side from both, like stuck in between, if like you don't know which side you're on, or you just don't care enough to choose a side. So my 2 points were, why would it be fake, and what would like make sense overall. So why would it be fake? Bill Kaysing and Randy Reed stated in their book, We Never Went to the Moon, it has been estimated that about 30% of the adult population in the U.S. does not believe that the country has landed astronauts on the moon. 30% is quite a lot based on the facts we have gathered proving it to be real. So why would we want to fake such a big thing? It's a simple answer actually, the space race. The US and the Soviet Union were involved in what was known as the space race, and the race lasted from 1957 all the way up to 1969. This race was a $30 billion project. It would have been very hard to fake the moon landing, but not completely impossible. The space race, you could say, was a huge influence on the world when it was happening. Lots and lots of propaganda techniques were used throughout this race, so much that if you didn't know about it, you were literally living under a rock. Cheryl L. Marlin stated in her journal, Space Race Propaganda, U.S. Coverage of the Soviet Sputniks in 1957. She had taken a survey for propaganda techniques used in the different magazines, U.S. News and World Report, Newsweek, and Time magazines. In the year 1957 alone, the U.S. News and World Report mentioned the space race about 45 times, Newsweek mentioned it up to 67 times, and lastly, Time had mentioned it about 43 times. 3 of the biggest magazines in the country at the time had reached thousands and thousands of people mentioning that the space race was one that the U.S. must win, or other mentions, creating tons of money towards the race. Next, I'll be talking about what would make sense. You could argue both sides all day, but in the end, what makes the most sense? There are hard facts for the moon landing, including rocks, videos, pictures, and whatever else they may have. But couldn't they all be props or scenes? If it was just a scene, they would more than likely have to splice together videos, considering they didn't have much technology as we do today for video editing. If you don't know what a splice is, it's when you take 2 separate videos and you try to match them up as close together as possible, creating more opportunities to change things throughout the scene. Being that splicing isn't always the cleanest, you would most likely see cuts in the scenes where they would have spliced it, making it look a bit glitchy or lagging. Some people argue with it being a scene by stating there were many trampolines throughout the scene, adding the bounciness of zero gravity. First off, if there were trampolines placed in the set, you would see the ground move, right? During the exploration, they walked on the moon for about 2.5 hours. That would have required a lot of technology to hide the fact that there were trampolines throughout the scene. Yes, it is possible to do so, but why go through all that trouble just to fake a landing on the moon? I feel it was probably 10 times easier to just actually go to the moon during this time than try and fake it on a movie set. Lastly, the moon rocks we own. Considering nobody has ever seen a moon rock before the landing, you could have easily faked it. Nobody knew exactly what they looked like, felt like, or anything about them really, therefore making it easier for it to honestly just be a normal rock. Doing so though, I believe somebody would have figured out it's a rock from Earth eventually. With all the technology we have now, somebody would have figured it out. Overall, there are so many people who believe it's fake or hoax, but there's not much backing it up. I spent hours looking up credible sources for it being fake, but it was actually quite hard. With everything we own now, you would think somebody would have actually scientifically figured out whether it's real or fake. Overall, what do you think makes sense? Today we have talked about the moon landing. Tim believed that the moon landing was real. David expressed how the moon landing was fake, and I attempted to find a middle ground on the matter. Real or fake now, it eventually didn't matter because we have been back to the moon a couple times, as well as having other space explorations. So think it through, what would make the most sense?
All right, we got some discussion questions. Do you believe the space race could have led to the U.S. faking the moon landing?
Potentially, but I don't think they would have. Just because they were in just like such a rush to beat, Russia. So that's the only reason I would think they want to fake it.
Do you think it was possible for the United States of America to use Hollywood to fake the moon landing?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the word would have got out, like someone would have said something on it, like.
That's a lot. How would the president look today if the USSR won the space race?
Ultimately, I don't think it would make that big of a difference because like we just started following like anyways. I also think that even if they got there first, I don't think the US would have given up. I think they would have gotten there like shortly after.
Will the United States fake another space stunt to get ahead of the other countries again, like interstellar travel? I guess will they like fake that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Have your views changed on this matter from the beginning of the speech? So you guys think it was fake?
I mean, there's a lot of both sides I understand, but like, I don't know, I just have a feeling that they went to the moon.
That's a speech.